One of these ripped-off characters has a secret origin so embarrassing, the publisher tried to erase it from history. I am exposing the stolen hero that started this entire comic book war. You have to stick until the end to see the side-by-side proof that will ruin your favorite character forever. This is the truth they never wanted you to see. Let's kick things off with what I honestly think is one of the most blatant comic book clones ever made. I'm talking about Tartarus from DC. The wild part? The writers didn't even hide it. They leaned into parody territory. This character is basically a bootleg Thanos dressed in Norse cosplay. Picture the Mad Titan if he went on a hiking trip through Canada and came back with a God of War starter pack. That's Tartarus. His backstory makes it even funnier. He hails from a parallel universe where he cut a deal with that reality's dark side. Yep, the actual Lord of Apocalypse, to spare Earth in exchange for letting him conquer it. His prize tools? The 8 rings of the ancient spectrum. If that doesn't sound suspiciously like Infinity Gems rebranded after a name swap, I don't know what does. With those rings, he launched what he grandly called the Eternity Conquest. Honestly, he came close to pulling it off too, until Darkseid casually broke his neck like he was snapping a breadstick. And when you stack him against Marvel's Thanos, the real deal who needs no introduction, there's no contest. Tartarus feels like Thanos ran through one of those old Hot Wheels color-shifting car wash toys, came out blue-gray, and DC said, "Yep, ship it." At least they never expected us to take him seriously. But then there's Imperiex. And this is where DC really tried to out-Galactus Galactus. Marvel's cosmic giant is a planet eater who sends out heralds like Silver Surfer to scout worlds for his endless hunger. Over time, he's appeared in countless comics, faced the Fantastic Four, and even been fleshed out with layers of personality. Imperiex, on the other hand, is the hold my beer version. Instead of eating planets, he obliterates entire galaxies, sending his minions to prep worlds for his universe-wiping crusade. The motive? Not hunger, just destiny. The problem is, instead of being awe-inspiring, it comes across as overstuffed and forgettable. Galactus still wins both in mythos and legacy. Then we've got an interesting matchup, Black Racer versus Silver Surfer. At first glance, it's easy to call Racer a knockoff. The skis, the shiny one-tone suit, the whole vibe showing up only a handful of years after Surfer's debut. But Black Racer isn't just a space traveler, he's death itself. Wherever he skis, he claims souls. Gods fall before him with nothing but a touch, and the fact that even Darkseid fears him says everything. Barry Allen was the only one fast enough to escape him. That's an incredible concept. Still, in terms of pop culture dominance, Silver Surfer edges him out by miles thanks to movies, shows, and iconic arcs. I still side with Surfer, though, especially since one of my favorite storylines lives on my channel right now. Now let's step into the archery duel that comic fans have debated for decades. Green Arrow versus Hawkeye. This one isn't cut and dry. Yes, Oliver Queen predates Clint Barton, and yes, at face value it seems like Marvel just mirrored DC's Archer. But once you look deeper, the differences are massive. Green Arrow is the billionaire castaway turned vigilante who honed his survival skills alone on an island before bringing them back to civilization. Hawkeye, meanwhile, is the orphan marksman who ran away from abuse, joined the circus, and eventually became an Avenger. Different motivations, different personalities. Both get mocked as the weakest on their teams, but both matter. The only reason Hawkeye takes the spotlight right now is the MCU machine. Oliver hasn't had his moment since the Arrowverse, but in my mind, when I picture a comic book Archer, Green Arrow is still the first image that pops up. And then there's the feline rivalry, Catwoman versus Black Cat. Selina Kyle has prowled comics since the 1940s, shifting between jewel thief, femme fatale, and tragic survivor, depending on who's writing her. Felicia Hardy didn't show up until decades later, but her characterization has been far more consistent. She's less maltreated, more mischievous, and has a Robin Hood streak, stealing from the corrupt rich to balance the scales. Between the two, Catwoman wins the cultural crown, no question. But if we're talking about who I'd rather deal with in real life, Black Cat takes it. She's up front, wears her heart more openly, and doesn't cross the same questionable moral lines Selina has. Let's talk wolves. Timberwolf versus Wolverine. Believe it or not, Logan owes more than a little inspiration to Bryn Londo. Timberwolf had the scruffy hair, the feral instincts, even the lone wolf, label long before Wolverine became Marvel's breakout antihero. The costumes, the color palettes, eerily close. But then Marvel threw in the adamantium claws and healing factor, and the rest is history. DC even tried to retro-add similar traits to Timberwolf after the fact, but it was too late. Wolverine had already become untouchable. And after the firestorm of hype around his latest cinematic return, forget it. There's simply no catching him. The Battle of Mercenaries is one of the easiest to point out when it comes to comic book cloning. Deadpool versus Deathstroke. By now, it's practically a running joke that Wade Wilson was modeled after Slade Wilson. Marvel didn't even bother to change the last name much. Both are highly skilled life-taker for hire, both masters of weapons and strategy, and both nearly impossible to put down thanks to accelerated healing. The main difference? Slade is the definition of cold precision, a chess player with blades. Wade, on the other hand, is chaos incarnate, armed with teleportation tech, regenerative abilities that outclass almost anyone in comics, and a mouth that never shuts. Marvel twisted the original blueprint into something outrageous. A fourth-wall-breaking trickster who can embarrass the deadliest foes while cracking jokes mid-battle. And that's why Deadpool, the supposed copy, ends up stealing the spotlight. He isn't just a life-taker. He's a walking parody of comics themselves. Deathstroke is iconic in his own right, especially as a Batman nemesis, but in terms of global recognition, Deadpool won the cultural lottery. He became the character kids grew up quoting, the anti-hero plastered across movies, memes, and merchandise. For me, and for the wider audience, this is one of those rare cases where the knockoff outshines the original. But let's flip the script. So far, the pattern's been Marvel riffing off DC. But sometimes, the inspiration flows in the opposite direction. Case in point, Darkseid versus Thanos. When Marvel needed their ultimate big bad, they looked across the street at DC and saw a template already thriving. Darkseid was a nightmare carved into stone, a tyrant who wanted to reshape reality itself into his own brutal design. Marvel reimagined that archetype into Thanos, but added something dangerous: unpredictability. Thanos doesn't just conquer, he obsesses. One day he's gathering cosmic relics like the Infinity Stones to fuel his dominance. Another, he's terrorizing entire worlds by demanding grisly tributes from families or hunting his own children across the galaxy. His cruelty has nuance, his schemes are strange and often deeply personal. Meanwhile, Darkseid remains the archetypal conqueror, the figure who feels ripped straight out of the history books of Empire. Both are terrifying, but Thanos has become more meme-worthy, thanks to the MCU juggernaut. For me, though, nostalgia tips the scale. The animated shows I grew up watching made Darkseid larger than life, and for that reason, he edges out his purple-skinned rival in my book. Now, here's where things get messy: Batman's influence. You could make an entire series cataloging every Marvel character inspired by him, but three stand out above the rest: Daredevil, Moon Knight, and Spider-Man. Each of them reflects a fragment of the Dark Knight's DNA. Moon Knight is the closest stylistically, a wealthy alter ego, funding gadgets and tech, and a merciless streak against criminals. He uses fear, brutality, and even his fractured psyche to fuel his war on crime. Daredevil mirrors Batman's origin of loss, his tragedy reshaping him into a weapon of justice. But his blindness, compensated with sonar-like senses, makes him even more bat-like than Batman himself. And Spider-Man? He carries Batman's moral compass, the rule against taking a life, the weight of tragedy, and a rogues gallery that mirrors the bizarre variety Gotham is known for. Even the parallels stretch to sidekicks, with Miles Morales standing as a Robin-esque counterpart. Would these heroes exist without Batman's template? Maybe not. And yet, they've become fully distinct. Spider-Man, in particular, is one of the most unique icons in comics. Still, you can't overlook how much of the Bat's shadow looms over their creation. Sliding into honorable mentions, we hit a scatter of comparisons. Magneto against Dr. Polaris is hardly worth the breath. Magneto dominates every time, both in power and legacy. Rocket Red versus Iron Man? That one barely counts. No matter how similar the suits look, Tony Stark wins hands down. Green Lantern versus Nova Corps is a closer discussion, as both explore spacefaring police forces. The Lantern mythos, though, is richer, stranger, and universally more beloved. And then there's the Terrifics squaring off with Marvel's Fantastic Four. It's a bold attempt by DC to replicate Marvel's first family, and while I've yet to dive deep into their stories, the Fantastic Four's cultural foothold is undeniable. Finally, we arrive at number one, the most shocking inspiration of them all: Did you know the X-Men were born from the bones of DC's Doom Patrol? It stunned me when I first learned it. Doom Patrol came first, introducing a team of outcasts led by a brilliant older man, all banding together to protect a world that didn't understand them. Then came X-Men, reshaping the concept into something sharper. Mutants as a metaphor for civil rights, systemic prejudice, and the struggle of marginalized groups. Here's where the difference lies. Doom Patrol delves into moral ambiguity, where heroes and villains blur in shades of gray. The X-Men, meanwhile, thrive on grand narratives of good versus evil, tied together by characters who are painfully relatable. Their stories became allegories for real-world struggles, and their cultural footprint is massive. For me, Doom Patrol is fascinating, strange, philosophical, even unsettling. But the X-Men shaped my childhood. Their impact is so monumental that without them, entire generations wouldn't have seen themselves reflected in heroes. And that's why, at the very top of this list, the copy surpasses the original. When the dust settles, my scoreboard reads 8 victories for the originals, 5 for the knockoffs. Which proves one thing. No matter how often a company borrows ideas, the original blueprint is rarely eclipsed. Unless, of course, the imitation dares to reinvent itself into something unforgettable. Do you think Marvel did better with their borrowed ideas, or did DC's versions hold the crown? Which ripoff shocked you most? Which one do you secretly prefer over the original? Drop your thoughts in the comments so we can settle this battle of icons together. And make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into the comic wars.